Okay, so the question for today is persuasion a moral endeavor? And the reason I'm asking this question is because I just finished reading Gorgias by Plato, which is a dialogue between Socrates and the sophist Gorgias, as well as Polus and Callicles, who I don't know if those are students of Gorgias or if they're just other sophists or rhetoricians. I'm not even sure what the difference is between those two things. But anyway, that's the topic of this book. And Socrates is trying to understand the purpose of sophistry, or the purpose of rhetoric as a skill in the context of ancient Athens. And the people that he's talking to are trying to defend why they think it's a good use of time, basically. So the general arguments are that from the sophistry side are that, I guess I have to give maybe some context of how Athens worked, but to my understanding, there weren't lawyers or anything, so it was very important for individuals to have the ability to argue or persuade, because anybody can file a lawsuit against them and they would have to pretty much fend for themselves in the courts and in front of, I don't know how the judicial system worked, if there was a jury. I'm assuming there was something similar to that. And so these people like Gorgias would sell their services, their service being an education in persuasion or rhetoric, the ability to get a good verdict for yourself in like a court of law or something. And so they believe it to be a very important skill, because it allows one to defend themselves against power, essentially, thereby giving the defendant power themselves. And so this kind of leads into a greater or a higher level argument about power and if that constitutes a moral status, right? If it's a good thing to be powerful. And Gorgias and Polus and Callicles would argue that it is a good thing, that power is what allows one to satisfy their desires, which is the ultimate good. It seems they kind of equate the word good and the word power in a way. And Socrates rejects that view. He believes that persuasion is, at its core, nothing more than just flattery. It's not concerned with finding truth. Rather, its objective is to appeal to the emotions or the preferences or the tastes of those listening and try to win them over to your side. And Socrates argues that this isn't a measure of goodness, in the same way that he makes analogies to like cookery or like making clothes, I think, as well. He makes the analogy that like a doctor is a better what's the word? A better judge of health than like a cook would be, because a cook's goal is just to satisfy whoever's eating it, whereas the doctor is more concerned with health. So like Socrates thinks doctors probably should be in charge of determining what people eat. And so he makes the analogy that the same is true with philosophy versus sophistry. He believes philosophy is interested in truth, which is better than, it's more reminiscent of good than persuasion. And some of the objections to Socrates are that if you're only concerned with finding truth, or if you're only concerned with, good, that leaves you weak. It leaves you liable to being effectively trampled over by someone more powerful than you, whether that's physically or in like a court, for example. So Socrates rebuts this by saying that that's also not a measure of good, being able to defend oneself, because suffering wrongdoing is better than doing wrong. And so this gets into kind of a different discussion about who is happier, like the person who suffers wrong versus the person who does wrong and gets away with it. And so Socrates believes that there's nothing worse than doing wrong and not being punished for it, because he views punishment as justice, and he views justice as a way to improve one's condition. So he sees punishment as a benevolent act towards a criminal, and therefore the worst punishment possible, or the worst misery someone could have, is to do wrong and then not be punished for it. And so he believes that like the dictators of the world at that time, the tyrants, are actually the most unhappy people, because they're not aligned with good, which in Socrates' mind is a disciplined mind and a respect for justice and seeking out justice for oneself and your family and neighbors as well. So I'm still a little bit confused about that. Like, it makes sense that in an objective sense, right, the people doing wrong are in a worse condition than even those suffering but who are doing right. But the people who are doing wrong are oftentimes so deluded that they don't, I'm not convinced that they ever actually feel that they are doing wrong. I mean, it feels relative to them, right? I'm sure they feel great, which is, I think, what Polus was conveying. And I'm not sure Socrates ever really answers this in a way that felt satisfying to me. Because he makes the argument that they are more unhappy, they are worse off, because it's like they're trying to fill up a cup with a hole in it, right? They're trying to satisfy desires that never really go away. And so they'll never be satisfied. That seems to be the crux of his argument about, like, dictators. But I feel like you can only feel bad about that. Like, the dictator may only feel bad about that, like, on his deathbed or something, and maybe not even that. I don't know. I mean, I agree that you will never find contentment chasing and chasing and chasing. But it seems like there are people who are genuinely satisfied with their lives doing just that. And I don't know if it's a sham, like, if it's just an act. But it seems like there are a lot of bad people that get away with being bad and are actually happy about getting away with it. So I think maybe what Socrates would say here is that, like, at the end of their life, when they are judged, right, because Socrates did believe in, he believed in the gods of, antiquity, right? So he would say that probably even if they were happy, even if they were satisfied, it wouldn't matter, because there's an afterlife as well. When their soul goes to be judged, then they would have nowhere to hide. They would have no material or worldly luxuries to hide behind anymore. And then they will suffer. They will be sent to Hades or something. And he references Sisyphus, who I didn't even know was a king, or I didn't know anything about him really before. But I think that's where his argument goes. And so I'm unsure of if Socrates' argument falls apart if you remove like an afterlife from the equation. And I worry that this kind of gets into moral relativism, because without an afterlife, who's to say that the person who's objectively worse off from his perspective, if he's doing bad but enjoys it in his own conscience, he's just fine. So I don't know. I don't really know what to make of it. I still think that objectively those people are worse off because of the fact that they're deluded. But there's almost this feeling of wanting them to face, wanting retribution or wanting vengeance for having done wrong. And I think that was also a common view at this time in ancient Athens, was that's just what you did. You wanted the worst for your enemy. But I'm not sure I agree with that. I think it's sad that people can be deluded so easily, and that it takes such an education to see through that. And I'm not sure what Socrates would say to that. But anyway, those are just some thoughts lingering about this book. Some other things I took away from this, just I'm more interested in learning about logic now and being able to parse arguments, like it seems like Socrates is doing. In fact, there's a couple of times he even says, like, if A does B and B whatever, then C is something. So I can see how logic is growing as a tool of the mind in ancient Athens, in this world. And I feel like I'm pretty uneducated in logic and fallacies, and this is something that this book struck me because I think that as a person, I'm pretty easily persuaded, and it's hard for me to decipher truth when I hear multiple people who all sound intelligent and reasoned, arguing completely different things, and it's hard to make sense of that. So that's, I think, what I got out of this book the most, is just an urge to learn more about logic and add that tool of philosophy to my arsenal, because it really feels like it leaves you stagnant when you're aware of your own ignorance and you start to kind of lose trust in what anybody says, because that you know that you could be being persuaded, and you don't really know what is wrong with what they're saying. You can't figure that out for yourself. So yeah, I want to learn. I don't know what book I should read to learn more about logic, or but anyway, that's Plato's Gorgias. Those are some of my thoughts on it. I definitely like this style of writing. It was easier to read for me than Herodotus was. So I think I'm excited to read more of Plato. I think next up for me is Meno, which I've actually read before, but that was one of the first philosophy readings I ever did, so I didn't really have any foundation to engage with it. So I'm looking forward to going back and seeing how it affects me differently now. So anyway, that's Gorgias by Plato.